Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folani. Hope you had a great weekend. Apologize for coming a bit behind schedule. Here we are, so there's no more time to spend. Our guest this morning is Mr. Morui Ediogiawere. I hope I didn't make too much of a mess of that. Okay, I can see you. I did. You're smiling. Good morning to you, and thank you very much for being with us.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Ediogiawere. Say it for me, please.
Ediogiawere.
I tried.
Yes,
Ediogiawere.
That's what. If you had cut it more, I would probably be frowning.
Thank you very much, Omorui. Mr. Ediogiawere is a startup business lawyer and a financial analyst. Okay, now legal luminary Chief Afe Babalola, SAN, has been proposing the idea of, that the president, that the country and the president should actually be looking into debt forgiveness, lowering the interest rates, and the actual principal itself. What are the options here to hear from you as a specialist?
Well, that may be just one way of coming out of this quagmire, because if you look at the data, external debt stock is over the roof, right? If you add cumulatively the last request for about $1.5 billion loan, it will be taking our debt stock to over 107 trillion naira in debt. If you look at the budgets, for instance, 29% of revenue is supposed to be used to service debt, while key developmental sectors of the country and the economy, healthcare, education, housing, are getting between 5 and 8% allocation. So that tells you that our debt burden is crushing, and painfully, our external debt grew by over 300% just within 2022 and 2023. We moved from $3 billion to $38 billion in debt. And so one way of going about it is to deploy the Obasanjo example, speak to our creditors and look, these debts are becoming a Herculean burden. And there's a way debts become so much that it becomes unpayable, and parties now have to sit down and renegotiate and look at how to come out of that quagmire. We are in a quagmire. Our economy has very, very unique challenges that are bedeviling key sectors of our economic growth. So we've got to look at data, and you'll find that our external debts are high. And one way of assuaging that is to possibly explore an interest freeze, because our interest today is about 152% interest. And that's also because over time we have failed to service those debts appropriately. And so agreements are agreements, right? A popular meme would say agreement is agreement, right? So what the parties have agreed will continue to inure until the parties sit back again and say, look, this is no longer feasible. I know that the IMF had released a report to say, look, our dependence on oil has done us a lot of damage economically, because oil revenue remains the mainstay of our economy. However, it's a major step back because it's keeping our population growth dynamics within a particular demographic.
Yes.
And it's affecting the growth of other sectors, right? So remember, I think I was with you when I said, look, I really want to see non-oil exports give oil a run for their money. It's becoming clearer by the day that we've got to look beyond oil. We've got to empower other sectors of the economy to be able to create that need balance that we need, But if you are asking for debt servicing, right, it's one thing to ask for debt service. It's another thing to justify, right, the need to get this this service, this incentives or these waivers, and also show how these waivers will improve and prevent you from coming back to borrow again.
Indeed.
Because it makes no economic sense.
Indeed. And one of the points that Chief Babalola is saying highlighted was the previously unknown, at least in this form, Japa syndrome. And arguably, the health sector has been quite viciously hit, with medical doctors trooping out. And he had opined that about the only way to stop this was to actually increase the pay for medical personnel. We have so many talented specialists that are out in the diaspora, other areas of the world, primarily because the services are rated, they're rated higher. When I say rated higher, they're getting a humongous salary compared to what is obtainable here. Now, the question I wanted to ask is that, be that as it may, and he suggested that that's about the only way he sees to stem this flow. You were talking about debt servicing earlier. Maybe the ordinary man's question would be, well, you people have managed it. You said, among other things, that we have failed in certain aspects that has brought this situation to where it's at. Why is there, or is there an obligation for our creditors to indeed listen to us and say, look, when we started off, this was the agreement and understanding, but now we'd like you to, begin to give us some quote-unquote free passes. What's in it for them, and why would we necessarily be hopeful when we make these requests?
So, one thing that is often said is that if you continue to do something the same way and expect a different result, you may just most likely be insane. And if we really look at our numbers, our current reality, we will find that one of the biggest challenges that have brought us here have been a large dependence on importation. And with importation comes a reliance on foreign exchange, and that has been one of the biggest challenges that we've had. If you also recall the central bank governor's presentation before the National Assembly last week, he gave a bit of data that showed a humongous, and for want of better language, a humongous influx, a humongous exportation of foreign exchange, right? Over 90 billion spent in education, healthcare, tourism, and the likes, right? Now, this tells you that we've got an indigenous problem. We're not producing as we should. We're not producing sustainably, right? And even if you also look at the IMF report, it also says that there is, you have over 25 million Nigerians suffering food insecurity, and this is about 13% of our population. And the challenge we have with food insecurity is general insecurity, especially in the hotbeds where food, in the large hubs for food production, the north and some other parts of the country. So we've got these challenges that we now have to look at, right, to address some of the things that have brought us here. Agric is fundamental. Improving indigenous manufacturing and exportation so as to attract inflow of foreign exchange is very important. Reliance on FX, right? Because part of the problem why it appears like our debt profile is just going over the pool is also the volatility of the naira against the dollar, right? And the only way you can stabilize the naira is to give it some measure of strength and bargaining power. The only way you can do that really is if you improve indigenous production, if you push more for exportation as against importation. So these are some of the things that we've got to look at. And these are some of the prevailing arguments that government has got to make before its creditors. To say, look, we want to look inward. We want to focus on developing, certain key indices for growth and development in this country in order to take us away from the debt reliance angle and to give us some measure of sustainability. And we believe that giving us this interest freeze or even cancellation in some instances, and even reduction of debt would help. And that was one of the things the passenger did at the time, because he looked at it to say, look, this monies are not payable, we just don't have it. And so he went on a trip around the world, and having unique conversations with each creditor to say, look, open the books again, let's look. But I assure you that if you give us this incentive, you will find this in our economy. And so this is a unique conversation that we've got to have. I'm excited to also know, right, and I'm inclined with his argument. The Minister of Finance is not a fan of borrowing, and he has continued to say that, look, if we want to get out of this quagmire, we've got to look at a reduced penchant for borrowing. And so Nigeria continues to be the largest black market in the world. So we will always be a creditor's delight, and they will always throw money to you and keep you perpetually in debt. But until you now look at your current realities, right, and how this is affecting your developmental project, how this is affecting even how much you are able to release on capital expenditure, on improving the economy and infrastructure growth in the nation, until you are able to now focus more on that, then you really will not be able to impactfully grow. We can be servicing debt at 29%, and financing healthcare at 5 or 6%. And then you talk about JAPA. People will JAPA.
Yes. Yes.
So human resource personnel require that buffer, right? I see the NLC for minimum wage and all that. And why those things are fantastic, right? If we don't fix our inflation problem, if we do not tackle this FX reliance, right, that makes our naira so volatile, we will continue to push for minimum wage increase, because no matter how you increase it, the cost of goods will continue to go up. And what's inflation? A lot of money chasing little product, right? So the dynamics have to be looked at, and we've got to now have some measure of out-of-the-box fiscal engineering. Looking at our current realities and what works best for us.
You said, among other things, that we're largely an import-based economy. Nigerians have developed a taste for imports. In fact, some of the activities that you see, either in the regular press or indeed on social media, you'd never know it to see some of the things that our people get up to. I imagine people will be wondering, of course, it's a distorted view, but then you do see the profligacy that some of our people are demonstrating. Our tastes are very, very high on important goods. You've spoken about our manufacturing is just down there in the doldrums. Since we've developed this taste, can there be an intervention? I think it was the last president who lamented that even toothpicks are a drain on our foreign reserve. So bad has the situation become. Is it a feasible option to just cut all non-essential imports, by which we mean luxury foods and that kind of a thing, luxury foods, luxury goods, and all of that, reserving the scarce, very, very minimal foreign exchange that we do have for really properly defined, necessities. How doable is that? Could that lead to social unrests?
So here's one thing that I do, and as a person I do. You do not stop something until you can provide a viable alternative, right? And I think that it will be a bit draconian to cut off without really looking at the alternatives. What are the alternatives we have on the ground, right? So before we start, tightening our importation belt, how are we loosening the manufacturing belt locally, right? What are we doing to empower local manufacturing, local production? And so that even when you shut the door on exports on certain goods, people have local alternatives to now go to and purchase. If you don't do that, you will just be creating a situation where there will be scarcity and where people will become ingenious and people will start smuggling. So that will not be an alternative, right? So let's look at focusing heavily on improving the indices of local manufacturing, power, security, tax rebates, some pioneer incentive statuses, certain political will and government support pushed more towards indigenous manufacturers. So here's the thing. You have people who are willing to produce locally, right? But they are competing with people who are importing, right? And they're not able to balance the costs. And that's a challenge, because the problem you now find is that I, who have produced locally, have pegged my products at a particular price. The fellow who is importing has pegged his at a particular price, and his is more affordable because he's not battling with some of the challenges that I am battling with producing locally. So government has got to look at those things. What are those things, and how do we fix them, right? Power is a very fundamental issue, and I always say, look, you can incentivize certain things like power. So how about us creating hotbeds in the country for power? To say, look, you know what? If you want to go into manufacturing, come to, I'm going to use my village, right? I'm going to use my state, Benin. Come to Benin for manufacturing. There'll be 20 hours uninterrupted, 24 hours uninterrupted power supply. And that becomes a hotbed for manufacturing. And you do that across 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 locations in the country, boosting. If you cut out the challenge of power, you have taken out a large chunk of every manufacturer's burden. I run a business and I can tell you how much I spend on power. And you will still find that alternative sources of power do not measure up in any way to the value of the main source of power if it is steady. So government must now begin to look at some of these things, right? It's good to give power to everybody in the country and stabilize power supply, great, but we're not there yet. Yeah. So let's focus on creating power manufacturing. Create power beds, so to speak. And so that's so, because for instance, in every part of the world, if you look at places, for instance, like China, the bulk of their productions are based on the resources of the locations. So you want to buy cotton, they'll tell you a particular location because they have large array of natural resources that fuel the cotton development. And so we've got to start looking at that. Now, when it comes to food, I have always said the problem we have with food supply, aside from insecurity, is our logistic supply chain. And if we don't fix the supply chain, we're just going to be making a mess of anything we're doing. Why don't we have train routes from the food hotspots down to the end users or the major cities where you have the consumers? If we don't start looking ingeniously to some of these challenges, what we'll find is that we will continue to cherry pick solutions that will not work for us. Security is another key challenge.
Yes.
Security, so, is integral to economic growth.
I beg your pardon. I was going to sort of interject there about clearly what you're saying, and I think what the government also knows is that we have to look at our economy differently from how it has been in the past, because now we're in something of a, to put it quite delicately, a very, very challenging situation. As I said, the government also knows this. President Tinubu's, ruling party, he arrived on the mantra of renewed hope, different thinking. Give me your candid assessment, just observing as a knowledgeable Nigerian, how optimistic you are that indeed we are proceeding along the right path in terms of looking at things differently. Because we've been hearing that it appears tough now, but we definitely are doing the right things, and that whereas it is tough, this is part of the cost that we are paying, it is going to be better. How much of that do you buy?
So let me tell you, let me respond to this by sharing a story, right? A woman in labor feels labor pain, and so that pain is intense, right? And the medical personnel always say, "Don't worry, just push, you'll be fine." Right? Just keep it until you're 10 centimeters dilated, and then you can start pushing. And so, they manage the pain. However, there is also something called epidural, or certain form of painkillers that are given in order to assuage that pain, especially when it gets intense. So really, we know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. But let me go into vernacular. A person where don't survive, now you go see the light at the end of the tunnel. So government has got to now look at essential palliatives that will help abridge that pain. Are we in a precarious economic situation? Yes. Was it brought about by the present administration? I do not think so. But is there a need to assuage and balance that pain? Definitely. And I'll tell you why, right? If you keep people just with that word of hold on, it will be fine at the end of the day, and things keep looking bleaker, so to speak, and it appears like there are certain challenges that they are facing, they won't buy whatever you're selling anymore. And so government has got to look at unique challenges. And let's look at it. I'm happy to see that they are opening up grains and releasing grains. But how about the food standardization arrangement? How about subsidizing the indices that is making food, staple foods go up? Right? So we saw some videos, and I'm sure you saw some videos, market women complaining a Congo, or I don't know what they call it, or a pint or a bucket of gari has gone up from a particular amount to another amount. How about us ensuring that we keep this thing within a particular limit? How about us looking clearly to those who are sabotaging the system? Because one big challenge that the Nigerian consuming market has is the opportunistic behavior of certain business personnel, who capitalize on every slight opportunity to maximize profit to the detriment of the people. And so how about looking intentionally to plug the holes that these people are relying on to be opportunistic? What are the things that Nigerians are crying about? Not too much. Staple food, transportation, and for business persons, tax.
Indeed.
Revenue generation.
Tax reliefs.
We're in an emergency situation. I'll expect government to say to our tax authorities, you know what? Give tax holidays for a particular amount of time, right? For certain businesses that meet a particular threshold. Talk to the market associations. Work out a price standardization arrangement by intentionally understanding the indices that are making these prices go up. You can't, if you really want to be certain, go to the location where these staple foods are being cultivated and harvested and all that. You will find that there is really no drastic increase in their costs. Yes, they're also feeling the brunt, but the increase is not drastic.
All right. I tell you what, Omaru, I beg your pardon for interrupting you. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Omaru. We'll take a short break now. We'll be right back, and we'll continue this conversation and also take perspectives from viewers watching us. Stay with us, please.